The death toll from last week's massive earthquakes in Turkey and Syria is nearing 42,000 and continuing to rapidly rise. Over 36,000 deaths have been reported in Turkey, nearly 6,000 in Syria. The World Health Organization's described northwestern Syria as the, quote, zone of greatest concern. The area was already facing a humanitarian crisis after nearly 12 years of war. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has described the earthquakes in Turkey as the deadliest natural disaster in a NATO country since the alliance was formed. Survivors in Turkey say they've been left with nothing.
It was not like any other earthquake. The roads were destroyed, our houses were demolished, there were no buildings left. Whole cities were flattened, everything disappeared. We can feed ourselves here, but no one knows how we're going to live.
In the Syrian city of Latakia, one mother described being rescued after 5 days.
We were trapped for 5 days. We couldn't move. We were calling God to save us. Me and my son were calling God to save us. Thank God that we survived, but my daughter left us. When I was in the corridor, I told my daughter there is an earthquake. She ran. May her soul rest in peace. 3 of us were stuck in the corridor, and then the rocks fell on us. My daughter directly died. May her soul rest in peace. Me and my son are alive. We were trapped. We couldn't move between the ceiling and rubbles. We couldn't move. We didn't have food or water. We wanted water only. It was also dark, rubbles. We called for help a lot. No one heard us.
We're joined now by 2 guests. Hisha Olsoy is Deputy Chair of the People's Democratic Party, a member of Turkish Parliament, who is in southern Turkey. It is in Diyarbakir, the largest Kurdish majority city in Turkey, where he has been helping with disaster relief since the earthquakes. And in Gaziantep, Turkey, Othman Makbey is the CEO of Action for Humanity, the parent charity of Syria Relief. His recent piece for Middle East Eye is titled, "What Else Should Happen Before the World Takes Syrian Suffering Seriously?" We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Othman Makbey, we're going to begin with you. Now, we recognize there's something like a 4-second delay as you stand there on site in Gaziantep, which is really ground zero in Turkey, and yet so many Syrian refugees were already there before the earthquake. Can you talk about what's happening there and what you think needs to happen?
Thank you very much. To be honest with you, I have seen in the last few days what I haven't seen in all of my life. I have been working in the humanitarian sector for the last 25 years. And what I have seen is totally devastating, something I haven't seen in all of my life. As you know, the Syrians have been suffering from war and poverty for the last 12 years. And now they are suffering after this earthquake. I have seen people in the last few days without shelter, without food, without any kind of heat. They are in this very cold weather here in the southern part of Turkey and the north part of Syria. The Syrians and the Turkish people here in these areas, they need a lot of help. They need a lot of support. And I don't think the Turkish government can't cope with this huge disaster. So therefore, the international community need to do more. Just to give you example of last year of the humanitarian aid plan, the international humanitarian aid plan, less than 50% of the promises, pledges, reached the Syrians. Now, we don't need 100%, we need 200%, 300%, because this is another disaster. I met people yesterday who displaced 3-4 times. This is their fourth place that they displaced to. They came from city to city, then northern Syria, and now they came to the south for safety and security. But now they have nothing. So we have obligation, we have the duty to support them. The international community needs to do more. It's not enough from the UK government to give only 5 million for this disaster. We are looking for more from the UK government and all other government, especially the United States government. We want more help. This is obligation. This is a duty for all of us to come and help and support. As I said earlier, poverty, war zone, and now earthquake hit the Syrians, and they are in a very dear situation, very difficult situation at this cold weather.
Othman, what help, apart from, of course, you said about the UK, whatever assistance they've given, which you say is inadequate, what other countries in Europe have contributed aid, and has the U.S. donated anything to assist Syrians impacted by this devastating earthquake?
Look, until now, we haven't seen much. And as you know, because the crossing were affected as well by the earthquake, so Thursday, Friday morning, some of the trucks started going inside Syria, especially from UN agencies. And as far as I know, these trucks related to projects previously agreed with different charities, and one of the charities is our charity, because we received some of these trucks, and that's not related to the earthquake. After that, and after the crossing was fixed, so some trucks and aid started going in. But as I said, if the UK only pledged 5 million, you can understand what about the other countries. And because of that, you can see that Turkey has big share. On figures, there was a report published by DI in the UK last year, shows that Turkey spent on humanitarian aid around 5.5 billion. And this is higher than any other European countries. And this is after the United States, who spent around 10 billion for humanitarian aid. Our friends, the Europeans and the European governments, they need to do more in order to support the Syrians. The Syrians have been suffering from all kinds of disasters in the last 12 years, and we can say enough is enough. This is obligation, and we have to do our best to support them and find solution for this disaster, long-term solution.
Othman, can you explain, you write about this in the piece, what are some of the constraints to getting aid to northwest Syria, which has been so severely impacted? And what are the governments or institutions that are making aid delivery more difficult?
Number one, as you know, the crossing. Because as you know, in January, the Security Council renewed the crossing of one or two borders to Syria. And the main one is affected heavily by the earthquake. I think the Turkish authorities managed to fix it, I think by Thursday or Friday. But this crossing is not enough. And I think one of the main problem is one crossing is not enough. So 2 days ago, I think the Security Council allowed another 2 crossing for humanitarian aid, I think for 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. And so these 4 are really not enough. And this is one of the main problems. The second one is, you know, the supply chain between Turkey and Syria, because the Syrians inside depend on goods to come from Turkey. And because of the earthquake and the south of Turkey was affected heavily, so was a huge need here as well in the south of Turkey. So therefore, there was shortage as well of items and goods to go in. So therefore, because we, as a charity Action for Humanity, we have been working inside Syria for the last 12 years. So we have warehouse, we have a lot of things inside. But what we have finished in the first 2-3 days. After that, the prices have increased dramatically, and the suppliers cannot supply us with more goods. So this means we need more crossing. Now we need more even ways to supply the goods inside Syria. And the third one, funding. So whatever we have raised as a charity from the community until now is not enough. Good, thank God we have other INGOs now. We have been in discussion with them to support us, and some of them, they already promised some good money. But as I said, all of that is not enough. Governments need to come forward and put more money to support the Syrians in the north of Syria and the Turkish. Bear in mind, because this disaster now affected Turkey as well, and the people of Turkey, 23 million of Turkish people, they are affected by this as well. So therefore, we need to support both sides, and we need to put more efforts inside Syria to stop the suffering of the Syrians.
Othman, you are CEO of Action for Humanity. Our condolences not only for the entire crisis, but for the loss in your own Action for Humanity family of aid workers, which is what all of these groups are dealing with, their own health workers, not to mention doctors and nurses, hospitals collapsing. But I wanted to ask your thoughts on lifting sanctions against Syria. Jane Ferguson writes in The New Yorker, the Assad regime and its ally Russia allegedly are preventing international aid from entering rebel-held areas, though we've heard some aid has gotten through. The lifting of sanctions and how difficult is it to get aid to the rebel-held areas, and how does that compare to aid in the Syrian government areas in Syria?
Yes, there is no doubt that the sanctions must be lifted. And we should have now, especially at this critical time, we should lift the sanctions and allow the humanitarian aid to go in. We have seen from the first and second day trucks going to the regime area, but we haven't seen that at least since the fourth or fifth day. And still, that is not enough for the northwest of Syria. We have to find different ways. Yeah, I'll tell you, for example, the UK government has changed the system of immigration to allow the people of Ukraine to come in, which is great because we have to support the Ukrainians, our neighbors, our friends, and that is another disaster. But at the same time, what they have done to allow Syrians to give them more flexibility to work hard to lift the sanctions in order to the humanitarian aid to reach the Syrians. So this is sometimes where people feel the double standard. So we need to be, when it comes to humanitarian, should be one standard. We deal with everyone on the same scale and the same standard. So therefore, they have all the Western government, and I hope the United States can lead as well on this regard, to find long-term solutions for the Syrians, especially those. You know, in the northwest of Syria, you have 4.8 million Syrians. 4.1 of them depends on aid, depend on charities and the humanitarian agencies to come and to provide them with water, food, shelter, and medicine. This is too much. Enough is enough. We as a charity have been working here for the last 12 years. Even this crisis affected us heavily. And all other humanitarian agencies who have been working here in the south of Turkey and the north of Syria. So we lost 4 members of our staff and the entire their families. And we lost tens of members of families of all our staff in Turkey and Syria. We have around 500 staff inside Syria, 70 here in the south of Turkey. Every one of them has lost family member or members, colleagues, and friends. And this is for the first time I see in my life that the first group of people who are affected by this crisis are the humanitarian. Therefore, the humanitarians, we need to support them. We need to help them in order to continue their work. And to be honest with you, they still, despite of all the pain, they have still doing the work. I have seen in my eyes that their commitment and determination to continue helping others.
Well, Othman Makbeh, we want to thank you so much for being with us, CEO of Action for Humanity, speaking to us from Gaziantep, which is also known as Antep in southern Turkey, to Diyarbakir in Turkey, where we're joined by Hishar Osoy, Deputy Chair of the People's Democratic Party, a member of the Turkish parliament representing Diyarbakir in southern Turkey, the largest Kurdish majority city in Turkey, where he's been helping with disaster relief since the earthquakes. Hishar Osoy, can you describe what's happening where you are? How similar is it to where Othman is, and what you think needs to happen right now?
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I am now in Diyarbakir. In Diyarbakir, we have only 6 buildings that were collapsed, and we have close to 500 people who lost their lives. But a lot of people, of course, they left the city. Many buildings are damaged. So when you compare with other places, of course, I would say it's even not comparable, because the kind of destruction and devastation in places like Adıyaman and Maraş and Hatay and certain districts of Gaziantep, I mean, is really, really big. We are having a complete disaster here. It's a nightmare situation. Not only so many people died, I mean, probably around 40,000. Now, these are the official records, but we know that there are still tens of thousands of people who are still under the rubble, and most of the rescue operations are already suspended. Millions of people were affected. Complete districts, complete towns are destroyed. So it's going to take a lot of time to recover, actually. In that sense, I totally agree with Osman that I mean, it's not really possible for the Turkish, I would say, government to respond to this crisis. In fact, in the first 3 days, state and governmental institutions, they even didn't exist. They weren't anywhere. It was just ordinary people, civil society organizations, political parties who mobilized to help people in need of urgent help, like food and shelter and those kinds of things. So the situation is bad. It's going to take a lot of time, and definitely there is a need for international support and solidarity. The government, unfortunately, declared emergency rule. So that was the first thing that they did. Rather than rescuing people from the rubble, they actually are now using emergency rule powers to somehow take control over even the humanitarian aid. It's a very bizarre situation. The government is obstructing, actually, civil society as well as political parties to mobilize people for help. So when I hear very deeply what Osman was saying about the need for international community to support Turkey and Syria, when you compare the amount of resources and money poured into, for example, the context of Ukraine, where we have a war actually over the last year because of the Russian invasion, of unlawful invasion, of course, of Ukraine. There is a war there. Many people are dying. Probably not this many people that we have lost, I mean, in the earthquake. But when you see the kinds, probably like hundreds of billions of dollars they were poured into that context, which is somehow militarizing the conflict, further militarizing the conflict. But when it is security and defense and those kinds of issues, there are always resources available. Money is always available. But when it comes to like a humanitarian situation like this, really, I mean, the numbers, the kind of funding that we are having from the international institutions is very, very limited. So more needs to be done. This is not a natural disaster in Turkey. It is a human-made disaster. Yes, earthquakes do happen. This is an earthquake zone. And since 1999, when we had a big earthquake in close to Istanbul, when we lost actually tens of thousands of people, since then a lot of scientists, experts, geologists, they have been warning our governments to prepare the country, particularly these towns and the people there for the earthquake, but nothing was done. And because we don't have safe buildings, we have a lot of corruption and bribery, unfortunately. There is no good governmental inspection of the construction sector, which is the backbone of Turkish economy. So there is a whole corrupt economy behind this whole disaster. That is why we think of this disaster not as kind of a natural disaster. I mean, people don't die naturally. This is a massacre. And from the local governments to the central government to many other institutions who are responsible to actually build like safe houses for our people. Every citizen should have a right to a safe place to live. But we have seen like buildings only that were constructed like last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, despite the fact that we have on the paper strict regulations. But nobody is following the rules. And then an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.7 happens, and we have tens of thousands of people dead. In Japan, for example, an earthquake of 9.1 even couldn't be this kind of deadly. So that is why I think, I hope that people in Turkey, our governments will take this as a very serious warning, because Turkey is an earthquake country. I mean, these earthquakes are going to happen. But we never take the lesson, and we never prepare our towns and our people. And in that sense, we all actually have a lot of responsibility.
Bashir, could you elaborate on that, why you believe that Turkey, despite this devastating earthquake of 1999, did not take steps? I mean, some have suggested that in the last 20 years in which Erdogan has been the leader, first as prime minister and then as president, there was an increasing centralization of power around the presidency, and that this somehow has contributed to Turkey's lack of preparedness. Could you respond to that, whether you think that's true, and if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, you see, in Turkey, there is something that we call imar in Turkish, which is, I think, it can be translated as zoning permission or zoning amnesty. So, which means that, I mean, people construct buildings not following the rules, and, all kinds of buildings which are not properly built, which do not have the permission from the government or the local authorities. These are just totally illegal settlements, okay? And then before almost every election, there is an amnesty for these people. So all these unlawfully constructed, like unsafe buildings, they are actually, the government pardons them, and all of them, they become legal. This is a very, very major problem. It's not about the AKP government. Historically, over the last 50, 60 years, we have this practice. Every single government, to get some votes, they declare these amnesties, and they make legal, unlawfully built, unsafe, houses, apartments. That is one thing. And the second thing is, of course, the housing, the housing and these buildings, they are totally left to the mercy of a totally unregulated housing and construction market. So even the inspection of these buildings is being done by private companies. That is the most ridiculous thing. This is about the safety of your citizens. So you cannot really leave the inspection of those buildings to private companies. So in that sense, there should be some kind of public regulation of these buildings. So, for example, a construction company, actually, they can also have a building inspection company, and they can pay that company to inspect the buildings that they themselves are constructing. It is such a ridiculous situation. So the local governments and the central government, they need to take responsibility and make sure that the houses that are being built are built properly based on the rules, and punish those who do not follow the rules. Honestly, we think this is a massacre, and there are perpetrators. Now the government is arresting a couple of contractors, some business people, but I mean, that is scapegoating, actually. And they are also attacking some poor Syrian refugees, accusing them of, like, stealing stuff from the rubble. So now we have the immigrants to attack, right? The Syrian poor refugees, immigrants to attack. And then we have a couple of contractors, some business people who built those buildings. Yes, they do have some responsibility, but the majority of the responsibility falls on the shoulders of the government and the local governments who are authorized, who are responsible to make sure that these buildings are built properly as safe ones. That is not happening. And there is corruption, there is bribery. And I was in Marash district. Actually, I was visiting this family, and they told me actually that in this earthquake zone in Pazarcık district of Marash, you can only build a 5-story building, but their building was 10-story. And I asked them, I said, how this happened? They said, we just saw the mayor and, we could get permission. Can you imagine that? I mean, it's incredible. I mean, and everybody knows this, actually. The society knows this. I mean, the government, local government, everybody is a part of this. So that is why I think this is a collectively carried out massacre, mass murder, really. I mean, and there are perpetrators of this, and these are not just some, contractors. I mean, the government should be kept responsible.
Hisham Osoy, we want to thank you so much for being with us, Deputy Chair of the People's Democratic Party, member of the Turkish Parliament, representing Diyarbakir in southern Turkey, the largest Kurdish majority city in Turkey, where we've been helping with disaster relief. Just came from a funeral.